There was her relative lack of trial experience compared to other federal judges in the Southern District of Florida.
2 different judges who are colleagues of Judge Cannon's called her up and asked her to consider removing herself from the case, including the fact that 2 more senior judges are calling Judge Cannon and asking her to consider stepping back from the case.
A judge supported by former President Trump is facing allegations of breaching judicial decorum. Typically, judges refrain from commenting on each other's cases, but concerns about perceived bias have led senior colleagues to urge her to recuse herself from the Trump case. Amid intense media scrutiny, Judge Aileen Cannon could potentially face significant repercussions. Judge Cannon, based in Florida, has come under fire for her handling of charges involving classified documents against Donald Trump. Despite advice from senior colleagues to step aside and pass the case to another judge when it was randomly assigned to her last June, Cannon chose to retain it. This decision was partly due to concerns about a perceived bias favoring Trump, stemming from her actions when initial allegations surfaced regarding Trump's retention of sensitive government documents. According to reports by the New York Times, Cannon, who was appointed to the federal bench by Trump, disregarded the advice and opted to keep overseeing the case, which is being prosecuted by special counsel Jack Smith. Subsequently, Judge Cannon has issued several controversial rulings that have contributed to trial delays, aligning with Trump's legal strategy to prolong proceedings beyond the November presidential election. Critics argue that if Trump were to be re-elected, he might influence the Department of Justice to drop the charges. Her decisions, including her denial of a gag order requested by special counsel Smith against Trump, have drawn sharp criticism. Former White House counsel Ty Cobb recently condemned Cannon's actions, labeling her refusal as potentially dangerous and inflammatory. Notably, concerns about Cannon impartiality were voiced early on by her colleagues, including the chief judge in her district, when she first assumed responsibility for the case. The call for Cannon to step aside intensified following her intervention on behalf of Trump after he filed a lawsuit claiming ownership of the documents seized by the FBI. She appointed a special master to review the documents before prosecutors could access them, a move that was later overturned by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta. The appellate court's rebuke underscored that Cannon had overstepped her authority in attempting to restrict investigators' access to the documents. Judge Cecilia Altanaga, the chief judge of Florida Southern District, reportedly advocated for Judge Cannon to recuse herself from the case involving former President Trump. Altanaga cited Cannon's previous controversial rulings in favor of Trump as grounds for stepping aside. Another judge, who preferred to remain unnamed, suggested that the case would be better handled by a judge closer to Miami, where the district's busiest courthouse is located, and where Trump was initially indicted. This location was equipped with facilities to securely store classified documents, which Fort Pierce, where Cannon presides, lacked. Despite these recommendations, Cannon decided to retain the case. As a result, a secure facility was constructed at taxpayer expense in the Fort Pierce courthouse, approximately 2 hours north of Miami, to accommodate the classified documents. Observers familiar with the situation expressed surprise at this turn of events in Judge Cannon's handling of the case. The effort by Judge Altanaga and other colleagues to persuade Cannon to step aside underscores the mounting criticism of her approach to the high-profile case. Legal experts note that Cannon's departure from customary practices in the Southern District of Florida, such as not delegating certain pretrial motions to a magistrate, has attracted attention. Judge Bruce Reinhart, despite being subordinate to Cannon, is viewed as a more experienced jurist. He notably authorized the FBI warrant to search Mar-a-Lago, Trump Florida club and residence, in connection with sensitive government documents that Trump retained after leaving office. Judge Cannon has been criticized for her adversarial stance towards prosecutors, sluggish handling of pretrial motions, and indefinite postponement of the trial, despite readiness indications from both the prosecution and defense for a summer start. Trump legal team has actively sought to delay proceedings until after the election, a strategy facilitated by Cannon's management of the case. If Trump were to return to the White House, he could potentially influence the Justice Department to drop the charges. As scrutiny of Cannon's management intensifies, critics speculate whether she is overwhelmed by the case, biased towards Trump, or both. According to Lisa Rubin, the construction of a new facility in Fort Pierce, at considerable expense, prompts questions about why the case hasn't been reassigned to a Miami judge, where suitable facilities already exist. When pressed, the district chief judge, appointed by George W. Bush, directly communicated his concerns to Cannon. While not questioning her experience outright, he suggested the case might benefit from a judge with more familiarity or seniority, alluding to past challenges she faced handling a civil suit related to the Mar-a-Lago search. The revelation of these internal discussions among federal judges has circulated widely, prompting interest and inquiries that both Judge Cannon and Judge Altanaga have yet to directly address. Requests for comment via the district court clerk, Angela E. Noble, have gone unanswered, with Noble indicating that judges typically refrain from commenting on ongoing cases. Such exchanges are typically part of informal mentorship efforts within the judiciary, overseen formally by Judge Altanaga as the district chief judge. Judge Cannon, as a Senate-confirmed judge appointed for life tenure with independent standing, ultimately holds the authority to disregard advice from senior colleagues on the district court. This freedom stems from her presidential appointment and ensures her autonomy in judicial matters. Discussions regarding efforts to persuade her to recuse herself were conducted anonymously, as those involved were not authorized to speak publicly on the matter. Information was separately relayed by various federal judges in the Southern District of Florida, including Judge Altanaga. While one source confirmed the attempt to convince Cannon to step aside, neither disclosed the identity of the second federal judge who approached her. One source provided general confirmation, while the other offered more detailed insights. According to the latter source, communications with Judge Cannon occurred over the phone. The first judge suggested that assigning the case to a judge closer to Miami's busiest courthouse, where the grand jury indicting Trump had convened, would be more practical. This courthouse also housed a secure facility capable of managing highly classified information critical for pre-trial motions and evidence handling. In contrast, Judge Cannon presides at the federal courthouse in Fort Pierce, located 2 hours north of Miami and lacking such facilities at the time of her case assignment. After Judge Cannon decided to retain the case, taxpayers incurred the expense of constructing a sensitive compartmented information facility (SIF) at the Fort Pierce courthouse. Chief Judge Altanaga, appointed by President George W. Bush, subsequently intervened more assertively. She emphasized the potential negative perceptions of Cannon overseeing the trial, citing concerns stemming from the earlier criminal investigation into Trump's retention of national security documents and obstruction of government efforts to recover them. Shortly after the search at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump filed a lawsuit against the government contesting the seizure of materials he claimed as personal property. He specifically requested the appointment of a special master to oversee the sorting of these materials, a role typically fulfilled by Judge Reinhardt. However, Judge Cannon departed from standard procedure by choosing to preside over the case herself. This decision surprised legal experts due to its unconventional nature. Judge Cannon not only restricted investigators' access to the evidence, but also appointed a special master whose role was advisory, with final decisions reserved for herself. Critics noted that Judge Cannon's actions occurred prior to any formal charges being filed, treating Trump differently from typical recipients of search warrants and acknowledging his unique status as a former president. Meanwhile, amidst ongoing legal maneuvers, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has reported receiving over 100 threats and abusive messages following his office's completion of the unprecedented hush money case against Donald Trump. These threats, which included hateful racial slurs, have prompted heightened scrutiny and increased security measures by the New York Police Department, as reported by the New York Daily News. It's deeply troubling to see such overt threats and racially motivated attacks directed at Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. The significant escalation in threats against him following the prosecution of Donald Trump underscores the intensity and hostility that can surround high-profile legal cases. These threats not only undermine the principles of justice but also highlight the challenges faced by public officials, particularly those from marginalized communities. Such incidents remind us of the critical importance of safeguarding the integrity of our legal institutions and protecting individuals who uphold the rule of law.